Tonight's special guest, the mayor of Torrington, Ryan Bingham, had a cold when interviewed. But as a good CEO, it didn't stop him from participating. Hello, everybody. This is Brian O'Haron, Planning for Success. This evening we have an honored guest, the mayor of Torrington, Connecticut, Ryan Bingham. You'll see in back of him, as I have done in the other interviews, the nice park, John Minetto State Park, which used to belong to Winsted and was sold to Torrington, and they now have a nice park there. That's where Caleb Beach's first home was in 1750. We're also connected nowadays by the Sue Grossman Still River Greenway between Winsted and Torrington, and that's moving along quite nicely along the old trolley tracks. And when I was a child, and my grandfather married in succession two different Winsted ladies. When his first wife died, he married again another Winsted lady. He used to come up on the trolley. I'm sure he went to the pavilions and to into the town of Winchester Grange and to the dances there. So we are closely connected, our two towns, and more so all the time. And so it's quite nice to have you here this evening.
Thank you. I should also mention we're connected in one other way, if not many more, in that Torrington and Winsted both serve as enterprise corridor zone cities and towns, which allows us to give benefits to companies that we bring into our town. So
yep,
it's another connection that we have.
How did I overlook that?
I know,
that's
very,
very
important
important
for both of our
Yeah,
communities.
it's happening quite nicely. All right, so first I wanted to just start asking you about your birthplace and your background and education prior to becoming mayor.
Sure. Well, I was actually born in Ventura, California. I grew up in Torrington, Connecticut when my mother moved back to her hometown. My family's been here for a number of generations, the Rouette family in Torrington. I grew up and went to Torrington Public Schools. I also attended Marist College for my political science and sociology degree, my bachelor's degree. And I came back to Torrington just wanting to get involved, wanting to make my community better. I got a little agitated as I decided to ask questions, where downtown revitalization was going, where, what the status of our education systems were. And, frankly wasn't happy with just the overall sense of community that I had grown up to love in Torrington, and I wanted to do something to change it. I knew I had the energy and the drive and somewhat the intelligence and the knowledge and know-how given to me by my family about politics in Torrington, so I decided to run for mayor. I was given the opportunity by the Republican Town Committee in 2005. Once they gave me the green light, it was all over from there. I knocked on 6,000 doors in my community, asking questions, listening to the people in Torrington, what their opinions are from A to Z, and it really benefited me not only in winning the election, but in my first few years. This is my third year now, my second term. Just the benefit of them, the community, knowing that I'm here to listen, to always to look at new ideas, and also taking their ideas and running with them and trying to have some positive change in Torrington.
Well, that's good. I was in the computer industry for most of my career. You're 1/3 of my age, roughly.
Oh, is that true?
Probably twice as much knowledge as I have, but...
I feel twice as old as you look, though.
And when I was young, the computer industry was started and run by 30-year-olds. It still is to a great extent to this day. I know many CEOs of computer companies that were less than 30 when I was beginning, and I think that's good. One of the things that they want to have in Winsted is they do keep saying, why can't we get our graduates to come back to Winsted and help benefit our society? And I think you're a perfect example of somebody who is educated in a city, off to school and back to help regenerate the city. Very good.
Just to jump on that, it's just important for all of us to come back to our communities and give what we've been given in growing up in these wonderful communities in the Northwest Hills. So it's definitely a drive of mine to try to get young people back into Torrington and to Winsted in the northwest corner through various methods. You know, we just started this Northwest Connecticut Young Professionals group, which you'll be surprised to know how many young professionals there are in our communities. You know, the next leaders of our major businesses in our town. So it's definitely pleasing to see people are coming back, and hopefully the recognition of this group and the amount of people will spur interest in people who may, you know, go to the West Coast or abroad for that matter, instead of coming back home.
When I was in Torrington as a youth, most of the mothers and fathers of my peers encouraged them to go to university and not to stay in the factories. And of course, most of them went to universities and never came back.
Mm-hmm.
Some did, but that happened throughout the valley here, I think. But the other thing I wanted to just stress here in the beginning is that you're also a member of the Litchfield Hills Board of Elected Officials, mm-hmm. and that's another team building type.
Yeah, I think it was very smart of a number of our predecessors in the regional community, Litchfield Hills for that matter, to start this regional planning organization. And that is, there's also the Northwest Connecticut Council of Governance, it's the Northwest COG, and LETCO, which is what I belong to, is the Litchfield Hills Council of Elected Officials. That's all our CEOs. There's 11 of us, 22 actually in total if you bring them all together, I believe. And it's really a great time to come together and think regionally, knowing that we all face similar problems in terms of, you know, the fact that our weather is the same, we have the same kind of roads. You know, a lot of the times we have the same kind of problems and issues when it comes to those issues, as well as if we start thinking regionally, we have bulk purchasing power, which may save us some money down the road. So it's really important that we start thinking regionally throughout the state, and maybe we can start competing with you know, the people in the West Coast who have been thinking countywide and regionally since their inception. So it's we're definitely behind the 8 ball in terms of our speaking regionally. And you know, I'll tell you what, it really is speaking volumes for our communities in doing that.
You meet once a month?
We meet once a month, and there's a number of subcommittees and whatnot that get together quite regularly to talk about, you know, A to Z, I mean really A to Z on a number of regional issues.
I've been to a couple of those meetings, and I think they're very productive, and I was very impressed by those. The number of voters eligible in Torrington, how many voters are there eligible?
I really couldn't tell you the exact number. I want to say it's between 10 and 20,000. I know there's 36,000 people, as seen in the 2000 census, that live in Torrington. But you know, in this given election, we've had so many people register. I really couldn't tell you what the exact number is, and maybe if you've pulled the records, you can.
I haven't, but that's close enough.
Yeah, I would say that would be about.
Yeah, we have about 6,500 here right now, and it's growing, of course, because people are signing up, which is good. You know,
absolutely.
we like to see people vote.
We had the largest voter turnout at our high school in the history of Torrington this year, partly because of the 2008 election, this year's election for president, but also because I really do see a change in momentum for kids getting involved and knowing that it's important for them to vote at the very basic level.
Good. Now, have you got any idea how close, when you won your first term, how close did you win? Did you win by a landslide, or did you win by 1 vote?
No, my first term I won by 224 votes. And my second run at it, which was this last November, 2007, I won by a few thousand. I want to say it was 76% of the vote.
Yeah.
But that's
Did you have to bang on a lot of doors again the second time?
The second term, my goal was to bang on 6,000 doors again. I didn't make my mark, unfortunately, but I want to say I did a few thousand again, knowing that my first run at it, I actually had a 40-hour work week, whereas this past term, it's more like 80. So it was harder for me to delineate time, or just, you know, put time aside to go and knock on doors, because it's not only trying to make sure the top priority, which is running the city effectively, is taking an effect. It's also, just being out into the community and the community events that take up a lot of my time as well. And then it's, the campaign. So it does sacrifice a lot of my time.
Did any doors get slammed in your face?
No, I never had a door slammed in my face. I mean, sometimes if people are home and they don't want to talk for any reason, they just don't answer the door, and that's the general policy. But when you go out and knock on doors, I'd say a little less than half of the people are actually home when you knock on doors, whether they're at work or out and about on the weekends. So you're, one door somebody might be there, another door you leave some literature and you're, just a note to say that you were there. But
I understand that. I've done some petitions around Winsted over the last few years since I've been back, and I figure it takes about a half an hour to get a signature, because you have to walk around, you have to knock, nobody's there, you have to explain, you have to listen to their problems, and that's all good, so I encourage that. Are you CEO of the City of Torrington? Chief Executive Officer?
Chief Executive Officer, Chief Elected Official. I am the CEO in many different forms of the acronym.
And who are you responsible to?
I am responsible directly to the voters in the City of Torrington, as I see it. I say to many people, I have 36,000 bosses that call quite regularly on a daily basis, and I enjoy it that way because, I work for the people of Torrington, and a lot of the decisions I make may not be, fitting to everybody. I'm not going to be able to please everybody at the same time, but at the same token, they let me know if I've done something wrong, if they don't agree with the decision, and they're not bashful in that sense.
And do you get a chance to speak to most of them when they call?
Absolutely. I return as many calls as I possibly can. See, my general order, my standing order with my staff is that if somebody demands to speak to me, that they get a hold of me. Many times people will call with an issue or problem that my staff may be able to handle, and they are very proactive in that sense, because it may be a day after they get it that they can get a hold of me. But if they need to speak to me, if they want to speak to me in any matter, even if they want to set up an appointment to come and see me, my door, as many people say, is open, and I look forward actually to meeting with people from the public. It's my favorite part of the job.
And what are you responsible for?
I'm responsible for the basic maintenance and continuance, as well as the strategic plan of the City of Torrington, excluding the Board of Education. So that would mean the various departments as you see it: wastewater, pollution, traffic, police, fire, the list goes on and on. But that's what I oversee. There are 26 department heads that work for the City of Torrington in various aspects that do the yeoman's work in their specific departments, and I trust that they do what they need to do. I definitely have put things in place for oversight to make sure that they are doing it, but as I saw it, and I have seen it, we have some great dedicated employees in the City of Torrington that have the same mindset as myself, as do the 36,000 people in the City of Torrington that are really their bosses as well. They pay their paychecks.
And what are your, I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask. One is, are you responsible for growing the grand list and getting additional tax-paying, one form or another, either housing projects or target companies or industrial companies into the City of Torrington?
I mean, essentially, it's a community effort. It's a team effort on many, many aspects. And really, anything that you point to, it's not going to be a one-man job. Although it does reflect upon me as how well we do with growing the grand list. As an example, I have the opportunity to appoint an economic development director, of which I think I made a great appointment in our Rose Ponte. She does a great job in reaching out to our businesses. Our first priority, I should say, is to keep the businesses that we have in Torrington to stay in Torrington, to make sure that they're happy, that if they decide to expand, that they have opportunities to do that, and that if there are incentives for them to do that, that we make sure that they're abundantly clear. And that also includes, spiffing up the front of their buildings in our facade improvement grants. But in our job, it is important, just even as a community member, a citizen in Torrington, to speak positively about our community to other people, to gain interest in businesses coming to Torrington. For example, just today, I had a phone call from one of our Board of Education members who is also a local banker, or works for a local bank, called me and said that he may have a company that is interested in coming to Torrington. So it's people like that that are out in the community, just meeting people, throwing them our way, and making sure that we can let them know why invest in Torrington, and give them the litany of reasons why it's important for them to come to the Northwest Corner, and in my case, into Torrington.
Do you think that you have what I would call sort of a business-friendly environment for when people do come knocking on your door, that they're treated respectfully and professionally?
It is of utmost concern to me that the businesses in Torrington remain happy, and that we are, quote, business-friendly, and that is on many different levels. That's if a business has an issue on maybe not just a municipality issue, but a global issue, that they get to speak to me, that I connect them with our Congress people or our state representatives, as well as the various departments within City Hall have to be reminded that it's about community service. They're doing something for the community, and they need to be working with the businesses that come into town, as well as those who are already in town. So it's definitely something that we work on every day. I can't say that Torrington is the most business-friendly community in the country, but I can say that we are always looking for new ideas, new ways to be business-friendly, and really have an open door to new ideas and new ways of doing business in the community. So, and I will say that when I came in, our semi-defunct Economic Development Commission is taking new strides and growing in their abilities to recognize some of the issues that we face as a community, and especially in this economic climate, to attract businesses and to keep businesses in town. And they're really doing a great job, as well as our department heads in building, planning and zoning, engineering, the various departments that do have an effect on business.
They do have a good reputation, from what I hear. Now, what were a little more mechanical here now, but the composition of the city council for each of your terms, Republicans, Democrats, and unaffiliated?
My first term, it was 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans on my Board of Safety, as well as my city council. I honestly, on my Board of Finance, could not tell you who's a Republican, Democrat, or Independent. My second term, the Republicans that ran on my ticket and that I ran on their ticket, we won 17 out of the 17 seats that we ran, which made the composition 4-2, 4 Republicans to 2 Democrats on the Board of Safety, and 4 Republicans to 2 Democrats on the City Council. And again, on my Board of Safety, I could not tell you who's which and where.
How many major parties, political parties, are active in Torrington?
There's 2 major parties that are active in Torrington, Democrats and Republicans, although the number of independents and unaffiliateds outweigh both the Democrats and Republicans, and they have a huge impact on the decisions that get made in our community. And I have made it a point not to get political in my position. In fact, I try to just disregard party affiliation in general, and I feel it's been pretty good so far. I've worked very well with the Democrats on our boards, our various boards in town, as well as our elected boards. So, it's just about people It's about putting Torrington first. It's not about party affiliation, because I'm a Republican does not mean I don't like new roads or new police officers, and the same goes for the Democrats. You know, I'm ideally a Republican for fiscal reasons, you know, to be quite honest, and you know, on many other issues, it has absolutely no effect on how I lead the city.
Good. Do you have a taxpayers association in Torrington?
We have a taxpayers association. They're not as active as in previous years. I can imagine, you know, with the economic climate as it is now, that they will become more active in the upcoming months, years. But you know, as we've seen in the local papers and talking to officials in Winsted, not nearly as active as Winsted does in terms of a taxpayers association.
And do you have any idea, and we don't need specific numbers, but what has sort of the average tax increase been over the last 10 years, let's say, in your Torrington?
Well, I mean, just trying off the top of my head, I mean, I'm not going to give you straight exact numbers, but we did a comparison during the last election, you know, as to what percentage increases I had proposed as opposed to my predecessor years past, where the average of the 5 years before me, I think, was somewhere around 5 or 6%, and where my increases had ranged, I think, about 3.15%. And last year, the actual increase on the city side, excluding the Board of Ed, was less than 3%. It was like 2.68.
Do you think the growth along East Main Street, the top of East Main Street, has contributed to that?
Actually, it hasn't proven to be too much of an impact. Our grand list has grown, you know, slightly, but you know, my first year, I think it grew less than 1%. Again, you know, close to 1% the year after, and this year, it looks like it's the same trend. You know, we're not growing our tax base as we'd like to see it grow, and that's for a number of reasons: the economy, you know, availability of space. But it's important, the fact that we see a difference, we see a change, we see more of you know, corridors for economic growth, as well as the growth of new jobs in industry, which has been a you know, bigger of an impact for me than growing the grand list is, you know, growing good paying, you know, good jobs and getting our companies to do that.
That's good. Our grand list, if you exclude the reval years, has gone up about the same, 0.9%, you know, close to 1%. The reval years, of course, it either goes up or down.
Totally, yeah. And that's this year will be a reval year, and it's almost a perfect storm as we see it, you know, in looking forward. It's a reval year. Unfortunately, it's an election year, so people are extra careful, and it's a tough financial time. So, you know, you've got that perfect storm for the tax rate in the upcoming, you know, 09 tax year. So we're kind of on the top of my agenda, you know, in the next few months, is to start straightening that out.
You've kind of answered this, but I'm going to ask it anyway specifically. Do the various parties and elected officials, no matter which party they're from, work together amicably and harmoniously in Torrington for the good of the city the majority of the time?
For a majority of the time, I'd say yes. I will not say we live in a perfect world, and I actually, if you had to ask, would say more times than not, it's the same party on two sides of the issue, you know, fighting for various reasons, you know, because our mindset in our boards and agencies is the community first, Torrington first, and you know, because you're a Democrat or a Republican does not necessarily mean you're going to agree all the time. Now, there has been votes where I've broken my first term 3-3 Republican Democrat, and I've actually broken in favor of Republicans and Democrats on a few times, and it's only been a handful of times where there's actually been a divide in political party. But you know, more times than not, it's, just different sides of the issue. It's not necessarily because of a political view or political party, which I think is great. Everybody comes in with their own perspectives, especially on our city council. We've got a wide variety of backgrounds in our community and levels of experience with municipal government. So it's been great.
Yeah, how do you obtain your authority as mayor?
Most of my authority is directly from the city charter, as I see it, but there's a number of state statutes and federal legislation that keep me, I guess, contained as to what I can and cannot do and what laws I have to abide by. But most of it's through city charter in terms of what departments are what, where I am, in terms of the organizational structure, where I fit with the boards and agencies, as well as the electorate.
And do you have to rely a lot on the city attorney for advice in that area, or do you know it all by heart?
I would say the city attorney definitely helps out a lot. If there ever is a question, and most of it is common sense, in my opinion, and I have read the charter, but to retain all that information is nearly impossible. So it's either to refer back to the city charter or to ask the city attorney is the best course of action.
Okay, now what documents as mayor can you sign and cannot sign?
I am generally the sole signature for many of the documents, legal documents for the city. Now that authorization to sign comes from various sources, whether it's directly from the city attorney for liens or releases of liens, or from the city council in terms of writing checks, Board of Finance for writing, purchase orders, over a certain amount of money. So it just kind of depends on who has authorized me to sign, but I sign on a number of levels, pretty much any and all documents. But I also require some backup signatures from department heads, especially if we're disposing of records. Our city clerk does a lot of the approvals for that as well.
What are your responsibilities on the budget?
My responsibility is to present essentially a balanced budget before the Board of Safety, City Council, and the Board of Finance ultimately. So it's working with the 26 department heads, making sure that their requests are not exorbitant, that they're looking at ways to save money, helping them find ways to save money, and to present clearly a budget that should not change all that much when it gets to the committee or council levels. And obviously the council has the overall approval on the specific line items, and they will make some changes as it goes and as the questions come up. And we've actually added a layer to that, where we have brought, when I say Board of Safety, it's specifically on the police and fire budget and the ancillary budgets that go with that public safety realm. But we've brought this budget subcommittee, as I've created, which has 2 members from the Board of Finance, 2 members from the City Council, and 2 members from the Board of Safety when a Board of Safety budget comes to existence. And we bring them in a close-knit group to go over any of the budget changes that I've requested or that I've made, to ask questions as to what happened, what the story was, why these budget changes exist, why they propose these budgets. And it helps, one, when it gets to the larger, like the City Council, they have a better idea. They can explain. It's not just me or the department head explaining it. It's other members of the City Council, it's other peers. And it's really helped smooth the process of budget time, where people are more informed and they can answer the questions easier, and it makes the process a lot smoother, so we can attack the real issues and the real cost drivers instead of the ancillary questions.
And do you also produce the capital budget?
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of the budget process every year. Capital budget's included, and really, we put all the budgets together, give it to the Board of Finance, which will go through it again and make changes as they see fit, and ultimately then approve both the city budget and the Board of Education budget as a whole. The Board of Education, they don't have line item control, and set the mill according to the expenses and the revenues as the weekend projected, obviously, in April and May, which is very difficult knowing state and federal revenues change as well as local revenues, given day-to-day changes.
Do you prepare the 5-year capital plan that's required by the state, and all these state statute requires a 5-year capital plan?
The 5-year capital plan, as well as strategic plans for the various departments, are reviewed every year. We ask that they get reviewed. So it's not necessarily me, like I said earlier. It's a team putting together a budget that includes experts, department heads, as well as our elected officials, which would include me as kind of the consistency factor in most of the budgets.
And what if you put together a budget and the electors don't like it?
There's an opportunity for the public, if they get a percentage of the overall electorate to sign a petition, the budget can go to referendum. The referendum, if it passes or if it fails, if the budget fails ultimately, it's not necessarily a binding referendum as the charter states, but it would be hard-pressed for me to disagree with the general electorate if that were the case. So essentially, if the electorate or a taxpayer group got enough signatures, had a referendum, and it failed, there would be some major changes needed to be had. We wouldn't just force it upon the electorate. So they do have a great say. I would say the greatest say is during election time in voting in new council members, new board of safety members, new mayors for that matter, in making the decisions based on those people's views, because you essentially are electing someone that should represent your views, given the decisions that they have to make.
And what are the finance board duties on the budget?
The finance board duties are taking all of this input, all of the work that gets done over the last, from January to March, maybe even more than that, putting that into perspective, taking the revenues into account, and pulling it all together into one concise budget and setting the mill rate. It's a very, very large and heavy duty for them to do, and we make sure that they have all the appropriate information, and if they request any information, that they get it timely for them to make a good decision.
And when they get the budget from after you give it to the council, and they get they have their meeting with the council or whatever, and they get the budget and they get the input from the Board of Education, can they make changes, adjust, modify, reject, or approve proposed budgets?
They can make line item changes to the city side. They cannot make line item changes to the Board of Education side. So if they didn't like the specific salary line item on the Board of Ed, they essentially could reduce that amount by the total of the overall budget request, but they couldn't go into that specific line item and take it off. Whereas in the city council, or the city side of the budget, if they didn't like the fact that, I had $200 in a copier contract line item, they could take that off by a vote of majority.
Do they hold public hearings before they send it to the city council?
Yes, there's a number of public hearings on the city side for the budget. And as well make all of the budget hearings, and there are a number of budget meetings, public and opportunities for public speaking to exist, are all through the process. But there are a Board of Education specific public hearing, as well as a city side public hearing, where members of the public can take everything, digest it, and come out and speak in favor or opposition to the entire budget or specific line items as they see fit.
And roughly how many people turn up for these public hearings? I mean, tens or hundreds?
For the city side, there are very few people, unfortunately, that come out and speak. Although there are plenty of opportunities for them and outlets for them to speak. the final budget hearing tends to be the least attended, whereas the Board of Ed this year saw almost a packed crowd in the auditorium at City Hall. So it's, I mean, it kind of depends on if there's a hot topic issue, but generally I think the public sees not a huge significant increase on the city side. They don't see a whole lot of waste in spending, but you know, if they do, they come out to one of the many public hearings or public meetings that we have and speak on specific items.
What are the city council duties on the budget?
The city council, as I mentioned before, take, you know, kind of what I propose, and as we have this subcommittee level, some of the members are on the same level as me going into these meetings, and they share ideas, questions, concerns. We try to bring the budgets to discussion in small chunks. So we'll do, you know, public works, one meeting, one full meeting, and then the next meeting we'll do, you know, public safety budgets. So it's so it's not too much to ask of them to research and ask questions and have questions at the time, as well as we can dedicate more time to, you know, adding, modifying, deleting, you know, specific line items in their meetings. But they have fairly large powers in how they can adjust the budgets when it gets to them.
Okay, and you are the chairman of the city council.
Yes, I forgot to mention,
Okay.
I'm the chairman of the Board of Safety, the City Council, and the Board of Finance. I sit as the ex officio chair, which is a non-voting member unless there's a tie. I break ties. I set the agendas with input from the members themselves as well as department heads. And a number of other committees and commissions in the city, I sit as this, you know, same kind of member, if not just an ex officio member, a non-voting member on the Board of Ed, but I serve on many different commissions.
Okay, and can you delegate that authority to somebody else?
Generally, no. I can ask some of my staff, as well as my assistant, Steve, to attend a meeting for me, but not for City Council, Board of Finance, or Board of Safety. I have a, we call it a deputy mayor. If I'm away or ill or unable to perform my duties for some reason, I have a rotating deputy mayor that fills in for me at those meetings. They serve as the chair, so they would run the meetings. I would have already set the agenda with staff, so they would just run the meeting, and in a case of a tie, they would be the tiebreaker.
Would they get 2 votes?
You know, I was trying to think of that. You know, you had asked the question in writing, and I'm not sure of that answer, but I believe they still retain their vote as a city council member, and then in effect, if there is a tie, they would have the tiebreaker. But that's just what I think, and that's not what I know.
Okay. The city council, when it gets to the budget and considers it and does whatever adjustments, whatever, and then it breaks it into 2 sections?
Yes, they would send forth operating budget as well as a capital budget going forward, as well as the Board of Ed does that as well.
And you call that Section A of the budget and Section B of the budget?
Yes, yes.
And then they submit it to the Finance Board, and they receive it back from the Finance Board and lay the tax.
That's correct. The Finance Board ultimately makes the final decision as to the appropriate tax laid.
This has all worked pretty smoothly between these groups?
In my 3 years, it has worked very smoothly, I would say. You know, besides obviously, you know, you are implementing a tax on people, and that is not easy when you have to raise taxes. But, you know, we give as much information as possible, and if we have to make those tough decisions like we did this year, we took $1.5 million off the overall budget, and we still had to raise taxes. So it wasn't, you know, it's not fun, it's not exciting, it's important work.
Hard work.
It's incredibly hard work, and it weighs significantly on those who really care about what they do. And, you know, I had many sleepless nights over thinking about this budget and previous budgets. And, you know, that's the job that they elected me to do, and I take it very seriously. And, you know, I'm sure most of our city council members and Board of Safety and Board of Finance members do as well. I know that.
You know, when I gave management courses around the world, I always told people, and I think I said it on my program here over the past year, management's against human nature because you have to say no a lot. You know, and,
no is not an easy word to say.
It's a tough word.
It is important to know that that no exists.
And you have to keep your perspective, of course, and we can't have no all the time, but it has to be a balance of all that. What are your responsibilities on the annual report?
The annual report we have charged our city clerk to compile, based on, you know, the fact that he collects and keeps most records. We also charge our comptroller when the audit report is finished to throw that as a major part of the annual report. And then my section is to, one, you know, make sure it's all correct, and to write a letter, basically the status of the city of Torrington, what I saw that year in terms of finances, the economy, everything else that kind of plays into the annual report, as well as kind of forecasting as I see it, what the future looks like based on, you know, various inputs from department heads. But most of the, you know, nitty-gritty work is done by the city clerk, and he does a great job, you know, trying to make it look nice, because some of the information's kind of dull. It's just financial information, but he puts in pictures of the city of Torrington and department heads and elected officials, and kind of dolls it up so that we can actually use it as a source of economic development to present to not only businesses in our community, but businesses that are looking into Torrington, so that they know they're investing into a community that's financially sound.
Good. What are the voters' responsibilities on the budget?
The voters, like I said, have the major responsibility of electing the people that make those decisions in the budget, and electing the people who make those good decisions, that have the same views as them, you know, in various aspects, as well as, if they see a bad budget, to get together a petition and put it to referendum. Now, I don't necessarily think that's the best idea, although if it's a last means for the taxpayers to do it, go ahead and do it. But I think they should be involved way before that in the process. So between electing and referendum potential, there's so many public hearings and public meetings for members of the public to actually make an impact, and they do. You know, I've seen so many decisions change based on public input, based on new information brought to our boards by the public, that I would say that's the most effective way of having an impact on the budget.
Can you appoint all your direct reports?
Are you talking about department heads?
Yeah, department heads. And
no, most of our department heads fall into two bargaining agreements. One's an actual union, which is a 818. It's a manager's union, and the other one's management resolution, which is a bargaining agreement, but not necessarily a union, which would include about 11 to 18 people, I think, and that's, you know, like the public works director and myself and my assistants. But my direct appointments are my assistant, my executive secretary, our corporation counsel, her secretary, economic development director, emergency management director, and a few other part-time volunteer positions that serve the city. Most of what we try to do is hire people based on merits through a process that include not just myself, but you know, the personnel director and the department heads to, you know, hire the right and best person for the job.
Are the finance board members appointed by you?
The finance members are appointed by me through the approval of the city council.
Yeah, that's one of the differences with the proposal we have for the November election. We're going to try to have them elected. There was a lot of debate about it in the Charter Revision Commission, but that's going to be interesting. And then, how long is a term for a finance board member?
Finance board member serves, I believe, 6-year terms, and I don't know if there are term limits, but generally if they're serving 2 terms after 12 years, you're pretty well done with the position, and we see a lot of turnover because it's a lot of time commitment for volunteers, and we try to get the best people for that job, knowing it's a really important job and it has a lot of expertise involved in it. So as I came in, we tried to make sure that we got experience from accountants, CPAs, bankers. We also have people who have experience in education and Board of Education experience, because that's an important part. It's actually a majority part of our overall budget, and it's very important that our Board of Finance understand in layman's terms what these costs go to, not just taking the word of the superintendent and the Board of Education, but having another layer of somebody who understands the costs. So it's a good eclectic mix of people that we've gotten on there, and have no political ties, no affiliations that I can speak of, and it's been really a pleasure working with the Board of Finance.
Do you need advice and counsel of the City Council to appoint?
Essentially, if there's a vacancy on the Board of Finance, I'd do a search. I'd ask people to recommend to me what people are out there, volunteer themselves, and I would essentially choose, in my opinion, the best qualified candidate and ask the City Council to approve it.
Can you remove any of the Board of Finance members?
With the approval of the City Council, I can remove upon request.
And I imagine that probably doesn't happen very often.
I haven't seen it. I don't know if it has ever happened, but I'm sure if it had to, it would be something pretty substantial to get somebody off.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good balance. We have the council members responsible for the policy and ordinances and all, and then a separate appointed board of experts to deal with the financial matters of the town.
Yeah, and the history behind that, as I've been told, it is John Brooks, who kind of was the Mr. Important of Torrington, the president of the board of the Torrington Savings Bank, as well as the library and the water company, and sat on the Board of Finance for quite some number of years.
You had the best.
Thought of that position and that system, and it has worked very well, because there's a lot of checks and balances, and it gives us an opportunity to make sure that we get the best people in those positions.
Well, once somebody told me, and I've mentioned this on the program before, when I first started to become a CEO level of small companies of my own, they'd say, "Brian, sign every check." And I know John Brooks signed every loan till almost the day he died at 100 years old. So, he paid very close attention to detail, and
he had great foresight.
Set a great example for your finance board down there. Can you suspend direct reports in case of misconduct in Torrington?
Yeah, essentially my job is the administrative officer, with obviously the consent of our experts, our personnel director, as well as we have a labor attorney. So if there's any issue, and unfortunately we have had to do it in my tenure, we've given various levels of, from suspension, termination, to written warnings, verbal warnings to employees who do not, do their job as laid out. And, that's with any, we have over 200 employees in the city, and, obviously there are going to be some employees that are not perfect all the time, and we have to deal with it appropriately, and we can't give them carte blanche, and sometimes they have to be told, what's right from wrong. And that's with any.
Now, you're full-time, required to be full-time, and do you get paid for overtime?
No, I'm a salary position. I'm, on the books, I think it's like 35 or 40 hours a week. By no means do I ever get 35 or 40 weeks. Even if I take a vacation, I'm working.
And do you have an expense account?
No, I mean, the city has given me a car. It's been, given to me by my predecessor, and I don't use it much, but it's there,
Okay.
for an emergency. If I have a drive to Hartford to, lobby on behalf of Torrington, it does save on some gas money, but there's no expense account, there's no city card, credit card or anything.
And who establishes your salary?
The city council and the board of finance ultimately established my salary.
Okay, now we're getting to almost to the end of the hour, so what I wanted to do was just ask you a few kind of tough questions that I like to talk about. Whenever you mention the mayoral form of government, which is what we are considering in town of Winchester for the November 4th ballot, the major question is, shall we choose a mayoral form or stick with the town manager form? Then there's 4 other questions on there too, more specific questions. But the first question most people say is, well, mayoral form, that introduces politics and breeds corruption. Do you have any comment to make about that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it seems like the grass is greener on the other side in any form of government, and you want to always try to improve and understand different forms of how your government works. I really like the mayoral form of government, elected mayoral form of government, because you get somebody in office who represents what the people want, what they want in their leader, in their mayor, and how they want the overall look and feel of the municipality. Whereas you have a layer removed in appointing or hiring a town manager. Now, that doesn't go to say that you don't have corruption in mayors. That also doesn't go to say that you don't have corruption in town managers, as we've seen in many of the cases and even in Connecticut.
Whenever I mention the mayoral form, of course, people point to some of the cities in America but they don't point to many of the ones that were successful with it. So that's what I'm trying to do here, is show people a good successful example.
Right, and that's you can always point to an unsuccessful in both ends, but we also have to have faith in our electorate, our people who can tell a phony when they see one, and they don't vote for that person, and they vote for somebody who truly cares and represents the feelings of the community.
And there's something to be said for the political parties being responsible enough to put forward good people, don't you think?
Absolutely. No, and I know it's tough a lot of the times to find a good person to run, because it's up in the air. It's only 2 years. It's maybe it's a lot of work to run a campaign, but at the same time, when you get that person, you have somebody that is going to be dedicated to the job, and that's going to run and do a great job. But
well, you're headed towards the average. You're going for your 4th. You'll be by the end of this term 4 years. Torrington has had since 1923. I never can remember exact numbers. 11 or 12 mayors, and the average mayor has been there 5.5 years, 5 years or so. Mm-hmm. And you had one. I think it was our friend Fred Daly was there altogether, a couple different terms, about 14 years, and the deal you done 10 years. Mm-hmm. Now, to be honest with you, in our early days, we had some mayors too. We had about 7 mayors, and they averaged 5 years. Mm-hmm. So you're getting towards that, and if your charter change passes to get 4 years, it kind of makes sense, because all your mayors have averaged 4 years anyway, mm-hmm. right, one way or the other. So now the next tough question is, whenever you mention the mayoral form, people will say, and I've asked the others the same questions, oh, in a mayoral form, any nut can run for office and be elected. What are your comments on that?
Well, I think that's the same case with people running for city council or board of selectmen who make the decisions on who to hire for a town manager. I mean, there's definitely you could throw any what ifs into a situation, and it's just important to recognize that there are outliers, that most of the times that it's not true. We have a lot of great elected officials. We have a lot of great mayors and first selectmen that do good work in Connecticut and in the Northwest corner, and they represent the people because the people put them there. The people decided that by majority that they thought this person could lead over this person, and very rarely, and I can't name one person that I would consider a nut in the 169 municipalities in Connecticut, and I know a lot of them serving on various boards through the state, as well as through Letco and Northwest COG. You know, there's eccentrics, there's people who are outspoken, you know, but there's nobody that doesn't have the best interest of the city. And if you do get somebody who is inexperienced like myself was when I first came in, you have so many layers of experience to help the new mayors come in, the new first selectmen. You have consistency in 5-year plans. You have consistency in department heads that have been there for years. You have consistency in elected officials that have been there for a number of terms that have been doing a good job. You know, you still have, in the ebbs and flows of the political world, you still have a lot of consistency. And that's really important as a mayor, to make sure that you still remain true to the overall integrity of the city and the plans that exist, if they're good plans.
I thank you very much for taking time out from your very busy schedule, coming here and trying to help us. And I do want to remind the audience that our form of mayoral government will be in many ways different than the Torrington form, but in essence will be pretty much the same. We are going to keep our referendum, we're going to keep our town meetings as we have in the past, and there are some other things we'll be doing differently, but in essence it's sort of the same thing. So I thank you very much.
Absolutely, thank you.